Right now, across southern Japan, rescue crews are still clearing rubble. Families are still searching for what they lost. A shopping mall lies partially collapsed. A centuries-old castle is freshly cracked and broken, and hundreds of thousands of people are dealing with damaged homes, disrupted water and power, and the constant nerve-shredding aftershocks that keep the ground trembling beneath their feet. Japan is still in the raw early days of recovering from a powerful and deadly earthquake that struck just days ago. And yet, as the nation tends to its wounds, the scientists who study Japan's restless earth have their eyes fixed on the horizon, on something far larger, because looming off Japan's coast is a threat that could, in a worst-case scenario, dwarf this disaster many times over. A catastrophe that Japan's own government has been warning its people about for years. So today, we're going to break down where Japan stands right now in the wake of this earthquake, and then turn to the far greater danger that hangs over the entire nation. What it is, why scientists are so concerned, and the honest truth about what on its way really means. And I promise you the accurate version, not the panic version, because this is a topic where fear-mongering runs rampant. And the reality is serious enough and more nuanced than any scary headline can capture. So let me give it to you straight. But before we dive in, do me one quick favor, because it genuinely helps this channel. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. And if you have any connection to Japan, whether you've lived there, visited, or have loved ones there, let me know. My thoughts are with everyone affected by this. And if you want the calm, accurate breakdown of these events instead of the internet doom machine, hit that subscribe button. It's free, it takes 1 second, and it means you'll always get the truth over the hype. A thumbs up helps push this out to more people who deserve the straight facts. All right, let's get into it. Let's start with where Japan actually is right now, the disaster it's currently living through. On July 28, 2026, a powerful earthquake struck Kumamoto Prefecture on the island of Kyushu, the southernmost of Japan's 4 main islands. Japan's meteorological agency measured it at a magnitude of 7.1. It was shallow, and it hit hard, registering the maximum level of 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale in the worst affected areas, a level of shaking so violent that people can't stand or move and furniture is thrown across rooms. As of the latest reports, at least 36 people have been confirmed killed, with dozens more injured, and those numbers have been climbing as rescue operations continue. The scenes of destruction have been heartbreaking. In the town of Kashima, a large shopping mall, the Aeon Mall, suffered a partial collapse, with its second floor coming down after an explosion believed to have been caused by a gas leak triggered by the quake. People were caught in that collapse. Elsewhere, at a paper mill in the city of Yatsushiro, a factory chimney came crashing down. And in a painful blow to the region's heritage, the historic Kumamoto Castle, a landmark first built in the early 1600s, and still undergoing repairs from a previous earthquake back in 2016, saw its stone walls damaged yet again. Across the prefecture, roads have been severed, buildings have collapsed, and essential utilities have been knocked out. Dozens of medical facilities have been operating with disruptions to their water, power, or gas. The bullet train and highway networks were thrown into disarray. This is a serious, deadly disaster, and the recovery will take a long time. And to make matters worse, the danger isn't fully past even now. The region continues to be rattled by ongoing aftershocks, and Japan's seismologists have cautioned that further strong earthquakes could still follow in the coming days. So the people of Kumamoto are living through that agonizing period where the initial catastrophe has passed, but the ground still won't settle and every tremor reawakens the fear. There's a painful echo here too. This same region was struck by a devastating earthquake sequence back in 2016, which displaced well over 100,000 people and damaged that same castle. For the people of Kumamoto, this is a wound reopened. That 2016 disaster is worth remembering because it shows the pattern of trauma this community has endured. The 2016 Kumamoto earthquakes came as a sequence, a powerful foreshock followed by an even larger main shock a day later. A 1-2 punch that killed dozens, destroyed homes, and forced around 180,000 people to evacuate. The region spent years rebuilding, and the beloved Kumamoto Castle, a symbol of the region's identity, was still under painstaking repair from that 2016 damage when this new earthquake struck and damaged it all over again. One local resident, speaking after this latest quake, captured the community's anguish, asking simply why this keeps happening to them and describing how the shaking brought back the terror of 2016 all over again. These are the human stories behind the statistics. Real people, in a real place, who have now been forced to live through 2 major earthquakes in a single decade. The recovery isn't just about rebuilding walls and roads. It's about a community summoning the resilience to endure yet again, to care for its injured, to shelter its displaced, and to find the strength to rebuild what was so recently rebuilt. That resilience, tested so cruelly and so often, is one of the most defining and admirable qualities of the Japanese people in the face of their restless land. So that is the disaster Japan is recovering from. It is real, it is tragic, and it deserves our full attention and compassion. But here's the sobering truth, the reason for this video. As terrible as the Kumamoto earthquake is, it is not the disaster that truly haunts Japan. It is not the big one that the nation has been bracing for. Because off Japan's southern coast, beneath the Pacific Ocean, lies a sleeping giant capable of a catastrophe on an almost unimaginable scale. And that is the something worse that scientists have their eyes on. That giant is called the Nankai Trough. Let me explain what it is, because understanding it is the key to everything. The Nankai Trough is a massive underwater fault zone, a subduction zone, that stretches for about 700 kilometers, more than 400 miles, along Japan's southern Pacific coast, running roughly from off the coast near Mount Fuji, down past the major population centers of central and western Japan. At a subduction zone, one tectonic plate is being forced down beneath another. Here, the Philippine Sea Plate is grinding beneath the plate that Japan sits on, and subduction zones like this produce the most powerful earthquakes on the entire planet. The magnitude in 8 and 9 monsters, the true megaquakes, along with the devastating tsunamis that accompany them. To understand what a subduction zone megaquake can do, Japan needs only to remember 2011. That year, the magnitude 9.0 Great East Japan earthquake struck off the country's northeastern coast along a different subduction zone. IT was so powerful, it generated tsunami waves reaching over 100 feet in places, killed more than 20,000 people, and triggered the Fukushima nuclear disaster. That is the caliber of catastrophe a subduction zone unleashes, a level of destruction on a completely different scale from even a severe crustal earthquake, like the one that just hit Kumamoto. The difference comes down to the sheer size of the fault that ruptures. A crustal fault beneath an island might slip along a stretch of tens of miles, but a subduction megathrust can rupture along hundreds of miles of fault all at once, and it shoves the entire seafloor upward, displacing colossal volumes of ocean water and birthing the tsunami. This is precisely why the Nankai Trough is so feared. It's the same type of monster that caused the 2011 catastrophe, but this time poised to strike some of the most densely populated and economically vital regions of Japan. And here's why scientists are so focused on it. The Nankai Trough has a long, well-documented history of unleashing catastrophic megaquakes on a fairly regular cycle, roughly every 100 to 200 years. The last time it ruptured in major earthquakes was in 1944 and 1946. That means it has now been about 8 decades since the last great Nankai earthquake. And based on that historical rhythm, scientists consider the fault to be, in their words, building toward its next rupture. The history here is genuinely chilling when you look closely. Going back through the centuries, Japanese records document these Nankai earthquakes recurring again and again, great disasters striking the same coastline generation after generation. One of the most feared scenarios comes from the year 1707, when an event known as the Hoei earthquake ruptured multiple segments of the Nankai Trough all at once, in a single catastrophic event that stands as one of the most powerful earthquakes in Japan's recorded history. Just weeks later, Mount Fuji itself erupted, in what may not have been a coincidence. Hat all segments rupturing together scenario is the true worst case, because the Nankai Trough is divided into sections that can break individually or in combination, and when they all go at once, you get the largest possible megaquake. The 1944 and 1946 events, by contrast, ruptured different segments a couple of years apart. So part of what scientists watch for is not just when the next rupture comes, but how much of the fault lets go, because that determines whether it's a terrible disaster or an almost incomprehensible one. In fact, Japan's Earthquake Research Committee, the nation's top body of earthquake scientists, has estimated that there is a 70 to 80% probability of a magnitude 8 to 9 earthquake striking along the Nankai Trough within the next 30 years. 70 to 80%. That is an extraordinarily high probability for such a catastrophic event, and it is the official assessment of Japan's leading experts. And the projected consequences are staggering, genuinely difficult to comprehend. According to Japanese government worst-case estimates, a full Nankai Trough megaquake could generate a massive tsunami that slams into the southern coast within minutes, in some places exceeding 30 feet in height. It could kill as many as around 300,000 people. It could destroy or damage more than 2 million buildings. And it could inflict economic damage well into the trillions of dollars, a blow that would reverberate not just across Japan, but through the entire global economy. To put the scale in perspective, the Kumamoto earthquake that Japan is grieving right now, as devastating as it is, would be a small fraction of what a Nankai megaquake could unleash, That is the something worse. Not a hypothetical, but a scientifically assessed high probability future event that Japan has been preparing for with deep concern. The tsunami is, in many ways, the most terrifying part of the Nankai scenario, and it comes down to one brutal word: minutes. Because the Nankai Trough runs so close to Japan's southern coast, a tsunami generated by a rupture there wouldn't take hours to arrive, as a tsunami crossing the ocean would. It could slam into coastal towns within just a few minutes of the shaking stopping, in some of the most exposed areas, perhaps only 2 or 3 minutes. That gives people almost no time to react. There's no waiting for an official all clear or detailed warning. The earthquake itself is the only warning, and the moment the violent shaking stops, anyone near the coast would need to already be moving to high ground, immediately running for their lives. This is why Japan has invested so heavily in tsunami evacuation towers, elevated refugee platforms, and relentless drilling of coastal communities, because in a Nankai tsunami, survival hinges on people reacting in seconds, from memory without hesitation. The regions at risk include some of Japan's most populated and industrialized stretches of coast, home to tens of millions of people, which is what pushes the worst-case casualty estimates so tragically high. The concern is so real that Japan has already taken an unprecedented step. Back in August of 2024, after a magnitude 7.1 earthquake struck in the Hyuga Sea near the southern end of the Nankai Zone, Japan's meteorological agency issued the country's first ever megaquake advisory for the Nankai Trough, a formal notice, under a warning system only introduced in 2019, that the probability of the big one had temporarily become elevated. It didn't predict a specific quake, and importantly, no megaquake followed during that advisory period. But it triggered a nationwide response. Some train services slowed, some beaches and events were closed or canceled, and people across the country rushed to stock up on emergency supplies. It was, in effect, a sobering national dress rehearsal for a disaster that everyone knows is coming eventually. The 2024 advisory also taught Japan some hard lessons about how difficult this kind of warning is to handle. Because the advisory couldn't say when or even if a megaquake would follow, many local governments and residents were left genuinely confused about what they were supposed to do. Some experts even criticized the warning as causing anxiety and disruption without clear, actionable guidance. And surveys afterward revealed something troubling. Even in the areas expected to suffer the most from a Nankai megaquake, only a fraction of people actually took new steps to prepare after the advisory. It's a very human problem. A threat that's real but not immediate is easy to push out of mind, and warnings that can't give a date are hard to act on. This is exactly why so many Japanese experts now emphasize steady, everyday preparedness over dramatic alerts. Keeping emergency supplies on hand, knowing your evacuation routes, securing your furniture, and drilling until the response is automatic. So that whenever the megaquake comes, whether that's next year or in several decades, people are already as ready as they can be, rather than scrambling in response to a warning that may or may not precede the real thing. Now, and this is the most important part of the whole video, where I absolutely refuse to mislead you. Let me give you the honest, careful truth about what on its way really means, because this is exactly where sensational coverage goes wrong. First, and most crucially, the Nankai megaquake cannot be predicted. Not by me, not by anyone, not by any scientist or any technology on Earth. When experts say the fault is overdue, or that there's an 80% chance in 30 years, that is a statement about long-term probability based on historical cycles. It is not a countdown clock ticking toward a specific date. That megaquake could strike tomorrow, or it could hold off for another 50 years. Both are entirely possible. On its way is true in the sense that it is essentially inevitable eventually, on nature's own geologic timescale, but it is not true in the sense of a scheduled, imminent event. And I think you deserve to understand that distinction clearly, because it's the difference between useful awareness and useless panic. Second, and this is critical given the timing, the Kumamoto earthquake that Japan is recovering from right now is not the same thing as the Nankai megaquake. It did not trigger it or make it more imminent. This is a common and understandable confusion, so let me be clear. The Kumamoto quake happened on a network of faults within the crust of the island of Kyushu, a different type of fault in a different location, driven by a different mechanism than the offshore Nankai subduction zone. They are separate geological systems, so while the Kumamoto disaster naturally reawakens the nation's anxiety about the big one, it is not a warning sign that the Nankai megaquake is now suddenly closer. Anyone linking the two as cause and effect, or suggesting the Kumamoto quake means Nankai is imminent, is not being accurate. And I'd add, there have been viral rumors, and even a manga comic, that supposedly predicted a great Japanese disaster, which have frightened some people and even affected tourism. Let me be direct, those are not science. No comic, no prophecy, no viral post can predict an earthquake. Only the sober, probabilistic assessments of actual seismologists carry any weight, and those assessments deal in decades and probabilities, not dates. So why, then, does Japan take this so incredibly seriously if it can't be predicted and might be decades away? Because the stakes are so catastrophically high that preparation is the only rational response, regardless of the exact timing. When you're facing a roughly 80% chance of a disaster that could kill hundreds of thousands of people, you don't wait for certainty. You prepare relentlessly, starting now, because eventually it could always turn out to be soon. And that's exactly the mindset Japan's scientists and DI disaster planners urge: not fear, not obsessive worry over when it will strike, but steady, practical readiness. One veteran Japanese seismologist put it well, arguing that people should focus on building genuine earthquake resilience, preparing their homes, their families, and their communities, rather than agonizing over an event that will arrive on its own geologic schedule, indifferent to human calendars. That is the healthy, accurate way to hold this threat. Take it seriously, prepare for it, and then get on with life. And here's a genuinely hopeful point that the Kumamoto disaster itself illustrates. Japan is, without question, the most earthquake-prepared nation on Earth. Its building codes are among the strictest anywhere, refined and toughened after every major disaster. Its people drill for earthquakes from childhood. Its early warning systems are the best in the world, capable of sending alerts to millions of phones seconds before shaking arrives. And that preparation saves enormous numbers of lives. Think about it. The Kumamoto earthquake was a powerful magnitude 7.1 that struck a populated area, and while the loss of dozens of lives is a genuine tragedy, in a less prepared country, an earthquake like that could have killed thousands. Japan's readiness is the reason the toll wasn't far higher, and that same readiness is what the nation is now working to scale up for the Nankai threat, strengthening coastal defenses, building tsunami evacuation towers, retrofitting buildings, and drilling communities on what to do. The megaquake would still be a catastrophe of historic proportions, but Japan's relentless preparation is the single biggest factor that could save hundreds of thousands of lives when it comes. So let me bring it all together with the honest bottom line. Japan is right now living through the painful recovery from the Kumamoto earthquake, a real deadly disaster that has claimed lives, collapsed buildings, and shaken a region to its core, with aftershocks still rattling the survivors. But the disaster that truly looms over the nation is something far greater. The Nankai Trough megaquake, a subduction zone monster with a 70 to 80% chance of striking within 30 years, and the potential, in a worst-case scenario, to kill hundreds of thousands and cause a tsunami within minutes. That is the something worse, or a genuine, scientifically assessed threat. But it cannot be predicted, it is not scheduled or imminent, and the Kumamoto quake did not bring it any closer. Those are separate events on separate faults. So the honest response is not dread, but preparation and resilience, the very qualities that have made Japan the most earthquake-ready nation on Earth, and that will save countless lives when the giant finally stirs. Japan grieves today, prepares for tomorrow, and endures, as it always has. I'm going to keep tracking all of it, the recovery in Kumamoto, the science of the Nankai Trough, and everything we learn about these threats and how Japan is preparing. If you want the calm, accurate version instead of the internet doom machine, subscribe so you don't miss an update. Because with a topic this surrounded by fear and misinformation, having someone give you the straight story is the whole point. Hit that like button to help this reach more people who deserve the truth instead of the hype. And drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And do you have a connection to Japan? Tell me. I read every single one, and my thoughts are with everyone affected. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there and look out for one another.